If this found you at midnight, let me know. I'm listening. She called it trash. A necklace I hadn't taken off since 1971. I didn't scold her. I smiled and swallowed the burn. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd learned, sometimes the loudest revenge is quiet red ink. My name is Eleanor Ward, 68, retired nurse, and apparently, an embarrassment to my granddaughter. The Sunday lunch was supposed to be casual, pasta salad, lemon bars, family. Instead, I got a performance. Emily, 17, tanned, glossy, always scrolling, glanced at me across the table, tilted her head, and said with a wrinkle in her nose, "Why do you still wear that? It looks like ... trash." She gestured to the gold chain around my neck. Thin, old, the clasp slightly rusted, the pendant no bigger than a thumbnail, but it had weight, memory weight. It had been with me longer than she'd been alive. I felt the comments sliced through the air like broken glass on tile. And what did my daughter say? Nothing. Not a laugh. Not a correction. Just kept scooping potato salad like it didn't matter. I smiled. Because women like me were taught to smile through heat. I excused myself soon after, walked to the patio, watched Emily show off a new diamond bracelet to her cousins, a birthday gift from her father, she said, loud enough for me to hear. I held the necklace in my palm, ran my thumb over the tiny edge where George once etched our initials, G&E, 1971. He'd given it to me the night before our courthouse wedding. We couldn't afford rings then, so he'd pawned his high school watch to buy the chain, and told me, "This will do, until I can give you better." He never did, because I never asked for better. Dinner ended in paper plates and plastic forks clinking in the trash. I helped wash the counter while my daughter scrolled through texts. No one thanked me. No one noticed when I left early. That night, back home, I stood in front of the mirror, still wearing the necklace. I didn't cry, just watched my reflection, long enough to remember who I was. Then, I walked to the safe. The one behind the linen closet, tucked behind the scratchy holiday towels no one used. It still smelled like cedar and secrets. Inside, George's funeral. Procomauer first joint tax returned the deed to this house and one manila envelope with my Willie hadn't opened it in years. Not since the lawyer said, "It's all standard, equally split." Back then, that felt fair. But now I saw the difference between family and familiar, between bloodline and loyalty, between what we give and what they think they deserve. I set the envelope on the kitchen table, next to a cup of cold tea. The room was still, like it knew something holy was about to happen. I opened the envelope, pulled out the will, and then I reached for the red pen in the drawer. The same one I used for grocery lists and reminders. This time, I wasn't listing ingredients. I uncapped the pen, held it steady, and before the ink touched paper, I whispered, not to anyone in particular, just to the air, "Let's see what trash can do." I kept everything they didn't want, not out of spite, out of memory. Letters, receipts, truth, the kinds of things people roll their eyes at until they're subpoenaed or sacred. After I put the red pen down, I opened the closet again, not for the safe, for the cedar box just below it. The one with the brass latch and the pink ribbon that's frayed like me, a little worn at the edges, but still holding. I hadn't opened it since George died. Inside, birthday cards, notes, tucked in lunch boxes, and one folded receipt from the day we bought the baby crib. We lost that pregnancy 3 weeks later, and he gave me the necklace. No flowers, no apology, just the chain, quiet, in his palm. "I didn't know what to get," he'd whispered, "but I wanted to give you something that wouldn't leave." And now, it was labeled trash by a girl who thought TikToks were timeless. One letter was dated September 1973, in George's handwriting. Crooked but certain. "You are still whole, even when life tells you otherwise." I closed my eyes. Felt it again, not grief, but the kind of love that sat with you in silence and didn't try to fix anything. I poured tea, sat on the floor with the box open beside me, and remembered the day my daughter, Emily's mother, had asked me to sell the necklace. "Just for now," she'd said. "We could use the money for the kitchen remodel." I'd laughed, thought it was a joke. She hadn't laughed back, said no. But that was the same year I'd said yes to signing refinancing papers I didn't fully understand. I stood up, walked to the desk, pulled out the old banker's folder from 2008, the one with the navy cover and the silver logo peeling at the edges. Inside, mortgage forms, transfer deeds, joint access accounts I never touched again. And then I saw it, tucked in the back like it didn't want to be found. A property document. My name, scratched out in faded ink, replaced with hers. No one had told me. No one had asked. It had been just for ease, they said. Just legal housekeeping. But I saw now, I'd handed over more than signatures. I'd handed over trust. And they cashed it in like a coupon. George had once warned me, said, future-proof everything. Don't assume people remember who you were just because they share your name. Didn't listen. But now. I was listening loud and clear. I picked up the phone, called a new lawyer, one who specialized in legacy disputes and what he called preventative clean slate drafting. Discretion is key, I told him. No one knows I'm calling. He replied, good, that's usually when it works best. We scheduled the consultation for Friday. That night I pulled the safe open again. This time, not for the necklace, but for the fireproof folder. I placed the old will inside, along with a note, let sleeping papers lie. Then I slid it back, locked the safe, turned off the hallway light. No one knew about the call. No one would know about the changes. Not until everything was signed. And this time, the ink would dry before the gossip started. Inheritance isn't always passed down. Sometimes it's severed. Sometimes it's rewritten in ink thick enough to silence entitlement. The attorney's office smelled like lemon, oil, and old dust. Like someone had tried to clean up history but left the corners untouched. He was younger than George Wood, trusted, but sharper. No family photos on the desk. No degrees framed in gold. Just a thick binder labeled Client Autonomy and a blue Mont Blanc pen that looked heavier than truth. I sat down across from him, laid my hands flat. Steady, dry. I want everything reviewed, I said. Everything I've signed. Everything they made me sign. He clicked his keyboard a few times. Brows furrowed. Your name is listed on a revocable living trust. But you're not the grantor. It was filed by your daughter and her husband 5 years ago. I blinked once. They added me without telling me. Not illegal, he said, just convenient. He leaned in. Convenient for them. The next hour was legal archaeology. We unearthed every hidden signature I didn't remember giving, every clause buried in language no mother should have to read twice. Then came the moment I'd like to revoke all existing powers of attorney, I said. He didn't blink. I signed the form. The pen glided like it had been waiting. No witnesses, no second opinions, just me rewriting the parts of the story they thought would stay theirs. The new will was drafted in silence. Beneficiaries, he asked. I listed them softly. A pediatric hospice. I once volunteered at a scholarship fund in George's name. Margaret, my best friend, who still checks in every Friday at noon. And a final entry, to be disclosed. He raised an eyebrow. I smiled. Just in case I meet someone worthy before I go. My daughter's name didn't make the cut, not even as a courtesy. But when the line came, the empty space where she used to belong, my hand paused. Not long. Just long enough for the ache to confirm it was still there. Later that night, I made myself chamomile tea and sat by the window. The porch light buzzed. The lavender had started to lean. Mercy, my dog, was snoring against the radiator. That's when my phone buzzed. A voicemail. Emily. I could already hear it in my head. Hey Grandma, happy birthday. Hope it was good or whatever. Sorry I didn't call earlier. I didn't need to hear it to know it. The guiltless, glossy kind of love that's all tone and no timing. I stared at the phone. The red notification blinked like an apology. Too late. I pressed delete. Didn't flinch, because I'd finally learned not every voice deserves a second listen. And some inheritances, they're better when you leave them unclaimed. The house was quiet again, but this time, it didn't feel empty. Just mine. Tomorrow, I'd seal the documents, and no one would know until I was already gone or far too alive to care. They stopped seeing me as a person, so I stopped performing as one. Turned out, when you stop playing the role, the audience gets nervous. She didn't call before coming, just knocked, sharp, impatient, like she already knew I was home and dared me not to answer. I opened the door. There she was, my daughter, lipstick to red for a Wednesday, purse too big for a casual visit. Just stopping by, she said, as if her eyes weren't already scanning behind me, scanning the furniture, the shelves, the safe. Almost I offered tea, poured it into the porcelain cups George bought at an estate sale. She called them old lady dishes once. Now she sipped from one like it belonged to her. Her gaze paused at my necklace. Again. You're still wearing that thing. I stirred my tea. The spoon clinked like punctuation. You always said you'd leave that to Emily one day. I smiled. Did I? She laughed, light and clipped. The kind of laugh women use when they're trying not to sound bothered. The kind of laugh I used to master. You know, she said, you could really simplify this place. Too many keepsakes, too many boxers. It's just clutter now. She meant the house. But what she really meant was me. I watched her fingers tap, the armrest counting, measuring, deciding. Legacy as a checklist. She talked about ease, about streamlining the paperwork, about how probate was a nightmare. I didn't answer, just folded a napkin, carefully, twice over it, had George's initials embroidered in navy blue. I pressed my thumb over them like a secret seal. She didn't notice. She was already checking the time on her watch. When she left, I didn't walk her out, didn't say drive safe or call me, just watched the door close with the kind of finality you don't clap for. Mercy padded over to me, her nails soft against the floor. She rested her chin on my knee, and we sat in the silence. Then I arose, walked to the bedroom, opened the drawer I hadn't touched in months, pulled out a velvet box. Inside, the necklace's twin, the one George had ordered secretly. Gold, but embedded with a single emerald for May, the month we lost the baby we never got to meet. I'd meant to give it to Emily on her graduation day. Now it wasn't a gift. It was a reminder. I locked it back inside, taped a label on the front. Not for those who forgot. I walked into the kitchen, refilled my tea, stood at the window as dusk folded itself around the porch. There was no voicemail tonight, no apology through the speaker, no expectation I'd open the door again. I didn't feel empty. I felt precise. The next morning, an envelope slid through the mail slot. No return address, just my full maiden name, handwritten in green ink. Inside a card, a seal. An invitation to my high school reunion. I hadn't heard from any of them in 50 years, and yet they remembered my name. He asked if I still wore the necklace. I said, every day you forgot it. And for the first time in decades, someone didn't flinch. The gymnasium smelled like lemon wax in time. Same wooden bleachers, same bulletin board with curling photos of class presidents and prom queens, all turned ghosts by fluorescent light. And then there he was, Richard, gray, at the temples, tall as ever, still wore corduroy, still stood like a man with something to say. Eleanor Ward, he said with a grin. No, I said. Eleanor Hollis again. His smile twitched. Sadness and respect, mixed in equal measure. We didn't speak at the buffet line, or during the trivia game about who married who. We waited until the sun dipped past the parking lot, and the music turned nostalgic. Then we walked, past the edge of the track, to the small lake behind the bleachers, the one we used to sit beside on senior skip days. He asked about George. I told him about the necklace. Still wear it? He asked, eyes on the pendant. I nodded. Every day you forgot it. He didn't laugh, just looked away at the water, the reeds. My son, he said quietly, thought my memories were liabilities, wanted the house, not the history. He paused. Sometimes we raised them too well. To forget us. We sat on the bench, the one with initials carved in it, though most had faded. Mine and his were never there. We hadn't lasted long enough. I used to think, I said, that family meant future, but sometimes it's just gravity, pulling pieces of you into versions you don't recognize. He handed me a tissue. I hadn't even realized the tear had fallen. I'm sorry, he said, not for what he'd done, but for what the world had made soft women carry. We agreed. No emails, no texts, only letters, ink on paper, truths you had to slow down to read. By the time I got home, the porch light buzzed overhead like a reminder. Mercy barked once from inside. The air smelled like pine and something old. I climbed the steps, bent to unlock the door. That's when I saw it, a folded envelope. No stamp, no name, just one word in pencil. Grandma. I stood still. Long enough for the porch light to flicker twice. I didn't open it. Not yet. I slid it into the inner pocket of my coat, the same one that still held the letter from Richard, written before I left the reunion. 2 letters, 2 generations, one looking back, one trying, maybe, to look in. I lit a candle that night, set both envelopes on the table, sat in silence, with my necklace resting warm against my collarbone. Then I whispered, "Let's see who remembers how to write the truth. If this found you at midnight, let me know. I'm listening." She didn't say sorry, but she said everything else. Sometimes the deepest apology is the one that stops pretending you're the villain. I opened the envelope slowly. Not like it held answers, more like it held evidence. Emily's handwriting hadn't changed much since middle school. Looped too wide, hearts instead of dots on her eyes. But this time, it was on lined notebook paper torn at the edge. Folded twice, maybe out of fear. "Hi, Grandma. I was stupid. The necklace thing. I didn't mean it. Or maybe I did. But I didn't understand it." I read the line twice. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I wasn't sure what it cost her to write it. Mom never told me anything about Grandpa. Not really, just that he was quiet and old-fashioned. "But you wear that necklace like armor." Armor. I let that word sit in my chest for a moment. Then I kept reading. "It's weird here. I mean, nice, big house, nice things, but everyone's always performing. I get good grades, and no one asks if I'm happy. Just if I've applied to the right schools." She was trying, not with excuses, but with the kind of honesty you can't fake in a text message. You don't have to write back. I guess I wanted to know if you'd ever tell me more about the necklace, about you. She didn't say love, she didn't say sorry, but she said enough for me to remember that there's a difference between being ignored and being silenced. And maybe, just maybe, she was done staying silent. I folded the letter, tucked it gently into the drawer beside my revised will. 2 documents, one legal, one human, both written after I stopped being polite about being forgotten. I didn't call her, didn't text, didn't forward the letter to her mother with a snide comment. I just sat still, watched the steam curl off my tea in slow, spiraled ribbons. Then, almost without thinking, I rose, walked to the linen closet, past the safe, past the fireproof folder. I opened the second velvet box, the one I hadn't touched in over a year, clicked open like it remembered my fingers. Inside wasn't what I'd expected. Not the emerald necklace, not a photo, not a note, but a small folded cloth napkin, tucked inside the first hospital bracelet. "Baby Whitman, May 14, 1972. The one we never brought home." Sat on the floor, cross-legged, back pressed to the closet wall. I held the bracelet like it might break, even after 50 years. Maybe that's what Emily didn't know yet. That the necklace wasn't gold. It was glue, holding me together long after things fell apart. I placed the bracelet back in the box, closed it with a soft snap. This time, I didn't lock it. I left it on my nightstand, in the open dot. Not for them, not for now, but maybe. One day, I stood by the window, tea cooling, letter still breathing softly in the drawer behind me, and for the first time in years, I whispered to the empty room, "Maybe she's not like the rest of them after all." If this story sounds like yours, don't scroll past. I'm here. Not all gifts come in time. Some arrive wrapped in silence, folded in years. Some wait in drawers, still breathing. I kept the necklace for her mother, once, back when I thought we could come back from anything. It had been tucked away in 1993, after the last time she slammed a door and said I made her feel small. A gold chain, simple, with a single amethyst charm. Her birthstone. I bought it the day she was accepted to college, meant to give it to her over coffee, maybe after a small congratulations card and a slice of peach pie. But that week, we fought about the house, and she said, "You act like a martyr, Mom, like sacrifice makes you holy." So I folded the Children might only see the rules, not the rescue. I wrote until the sun shifted across the kitchen floor. Then I printed the letter, folded it 3 times, tucked it into the velvet box. But I didn't mail it. I found a label instead. Wrote, "For words in careful script, for when you're ready." And I slid it back into the drawer beside the first one. That night, I made soup. Nothing fancy. Just carrots, thyme, and the kind of broth you stir slowly. Mercy, curled by the heater, wasn't sad. Not exactly, just full, with all the things I never gave away. The phone rang after dinner. Late, too late for politeness. I almost didn't answer, but the caller ID flashed. Martin L., attorney. I picked up. "Mrs. Hollis," he said, voice tight. "You might want to come in tomorrow. There's been an attempt to challenge your revisions." My grip on the spoon loosened. Who? I asked. I already knew. He cleared his throat. Your daughter? She's filed a motion claiming elder coercion. Didn't respond. Didn't curse. Didn't cry. Just stared at the boxers in the drawer. At the letters no one else had earned yet. Because the truth, you can rewrite your will, but some people never stop trying to edit your story. I hung up the phone, lit a candle, and for the first time in years, I didn't pray for peace. I prayed to be remembered correctly. If this found you at midnight, let me know I'm listening. She called me confused. I called it betrayal, spelled legally. Nothing says I love you quite like an accusation of mental decline. The office smelled sharper this time. Coffee, toner, and something metallic. Martin slid the folder toward me without a word. A yellow tab marked filed motion, contest of testamentary capacity. I read the line out loud, slow, like I needed help understanding it. Claimant alleges the testator is not of sound mind. I looked up, the testator, I said. Martin nodded, gently. You are, and you're still sharp enough to read the fine print. I smiled. Only my lips didn't lift. We went to work. Not damage control, proof, journal entries, voice memos I'd left myself while drafting the first revision, each dated, each clear, each with more clarity than any of my daughter's seasonal check-ins. I brought the notary's affidavit. She remembered the way I'd organized the documents, the way I made a checklist and double-checked it. She knew what she was doing. The affidavit said she looked like a woman who'd already been underestimated too many times. That line made me laugh once, quiet and bitter. George would have called it my victory cough. Martin suggested a character letter. I called my financial advisor. Been with him 15 years. He faxed it within the hour. Eleanor Hollis has managed her portfolio with precision, logic, and self-advocacy. She is not only competent, but exceptional. I didn't cry, but something in me loosened, like a grip that had been clenched since 2009. And then I wrote one myself. Not typed. Not dictated. I sat at my kitchen table, the same place I folded baby clothes and overdue bills. I wrote, I am still here. My name is Eleanor Hollis. I am 68 years old, and I have not forgotten myself. I remember every birthday, every betrayal. I remember my husband's last joke. I remember my daughter's first lie. I remember what love feels like when it's real, and when it's polite, but hollow. And I remember signing my name because I meant it. I am not confused. I am not coerced. I am not gone. I am simply, finally choosing myself. I folded it in thirds, sealed it with wax, let the red drip, slowly, like ceremony. The court date came through later that week. Martin slid the confirmation across the desk. His mouth was tight. I didn't need to ask. April 12th, he said. I nodded. George's birthday. I held the paper in my hands like a dare, not trembling, not angry, just aware. Because now, the courtroom wouldn't just hold signatures and affidavits. It would hold ghosts. That night, I didn't light a candle. I lit the fire, real wood, real flame, sat on the floor beside Mercy, and reread the affidavit I'd written. The ink had dried. The air smelled like smoke and something ancient. And for the first time since the contest was filed, I spoke aloud. Let them try. The wind knocked once against the front door. A coincidence, maybe, but it sounded like a warning, or a guest arriving early. They questioned my memory, so I handed them a timeline. Every page signed, stamped, stitched in logic, because I knew who'd try to erase me. The courtroom smelled like new carpet and old judgment, clean, cold, humming with silence. George's birthday. I wore navy. Not for mourning, for memory. Same necklace, same spine. The judge didn't look cruel, just tired. The way people get after reading too many lies disguised as petitions. Martin stood first. He was calm, the kind of calm that says, we don't bluff, we bring ledgers. Your Honor, he began. The respondent may be 68, but she has sharper recall than most boardrooms I've entered. Then he let the paper do the talking. Journal entries, voice memos, a notarized checklist, time-stamped, dated, co-signed, even the wax seal. Then it was her turn. My daughter, wearing pearls I'd gifted her the year Emily was born. She cried on cue, dabbing at tears with tissue that matched her blazer. She's not confused, she said, voice wobbling like a child pretending. She's just, lost. and emotional. She's been isolated. She talks to a dog and writes letters to people who are dead. The courtroom didn't flinch. Neither did I, because weakness isn't volume. It's expecting no one will challenge your script. When they called me to speak, I didn't bring notes. I brought presence. I am not confused, I said. I am deliberate. I let the words breathe before continuing. My husband died on this date, years ago. He gave me this necklace not to fix grief, but to witness it. I've worn it every day since, not because I forgot, but because I remember. I looked at the judge, held his gaze like I used to hold George's, steady, unflinching. They say I'm unwell because I stopped making space for people who erase me. I say I'm finally healthy because I stopped calling that love. There was no sound when I sat back down. Not even the rustle of paper, just the clock ticking above the bench, each second daring her to say something real. She didn't. She just mouthed across the aisle, "You'll regret this." I looked at her like a stranger, because that's what she'd become. The judge read the decision like it was already carved. The court finds no evidence of diminished capacity. The revised will is upheld as valid and reflective of Ms. Hollis' autonomy. Petition denied. Gavel paper shuffled. Just like that, my story was mine again. She stormed out, didn't look back, didn't thank the judge, didn't take the pearls, but someone stayed. Emily, in the back row, still silent, wearing a coat too big and an expression too old. We didn't speak. Not yet. She just watched. I walked outside. April sun, crisp wind, the kind George used to call honest weather. My phone buzzed. One message. Emily, can I come see you? I stared at the text, felt the weight of both verdict and silence. Then I looked at the sky and whispered what I hadn't in years. Only if you're coming as yourself. And I didn't press send. Not yet, because forgiveness deserves the same care as fire once lit. It changes everything. She knocked like she used to. 2 soft taps and a breath held behind them, the way she did when she was little, asking for a story after bedtime. Only this time, she stood taller, older, but her eyes still carried that same uncertain question. "Will you let me in?" I opened the door without a word, let the screen creak open, let the silence invite her instead of my voice. Emily stepped in slowly. No makeup, no phone in hand, just her, in jeans and a borrowed flannel that hung off her shoulders like she hadn't planned the visit, just followed instinct. She didn't look around like her mother did, didn't scan for valuables or paperwork, just found a spot at the table, the same one where I'd once fed her animal crackers and apple slices, and sat. I poured tea, the kind she used to wrinkle her nose at, chamomile, steeped long enough to tell the truth. She reached into her coat, pulled out the velvet box, and the letter still folded, untouched. "Not yet," she said, placing both on the table, "but maybe one day." I nodded. No pressure, no persuasion, just presence. She wrapped her hands around the tea mug like it was a lighthouse in a storm. "I never really knew him," she whispered. "Grandpa." I didn't answer at first, just breathed in the steam, let memory fill the room like heat from the stove. "He was quiet," I said, "but not small. He listened like every word had weight. He held doors open and didn't announce it." I smiled softly. "And he danced terribly." She laughed, short, surprised. Longer now, but still carrying traces of the girl who used to braid my hair with buttersticky fingers. She stood, walked to me, and hugged me. Not a sidearm hug, not a teenage shrug, but real, chest to chest, breath to breath. It was the kind of hug that says, "I see you now." And it undid something I didn't know was still knotted. As we stood there, tea growing cold, the moment deciding what to do next, she pulled back slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom doesn't know I'm here." I didn't flinch, didn't scold or warn. I just looked her in the eye and said the quietest truth I had, "Then let's make this moment count." And as we sat again, this time side by side, her head resting gently on my shoulder, I thought, maybe stories do skip a generation, but if we're lucky, some find their way back. She gave it back, not to spite me, not to hurt. She gave it back the way some people return keys after years, not because they don't want in, but because they finally understand the door. Emily had gone, back to her life, back to her own story. And I sat at the table, the velvet box still warm from her coat pocket, still closed, still waiting. But this time, I didn't write to her. I pulled out a blank sheet. Not ivory or perfumed, just plain, white paper, the kind you use when you're done decorating pain. And I wrote for my daughter, not to explain, not to accuse, just to record. Once, I began, I bought you something, a necklace gold with an amethyst charm. I never gave it to you. You never asked, but I still kept it. I told her the truth, that I had wanted to celebrate her, that I'd been proud, that I thought we could meet in the middle, between her hunger for forward and my grip on the past. But then came the day she told me sacrifice wasn't love, and motherhood, if not convenient, was manipulation. I wrote it all, not to haunt her, but because stories rot when you hide them too long. Then, I placed the necklace inside, no wrapping, no note, just the letter beside it, and sealed the box again. But this time, I didn't leave it in the drawer. I drove 15 minutes to the safety deposit box George and I opened in '89. The key still scratched from his key, still labeled G and E. I placed it inside, labeled it in black ink, for truth, not timing. Then I locked it shut. That afternoon, Emily came again. No warning, just her and a bundle of rosemary clutched in both hands. "We plant this by the porch?" she asked. We did, hands in the dirt, knees to the ground, digging not just for roots, but for something softer. She asked about its meaning. Remembrance, I said, and forgiveness, depending on who you ask. And when I brushed my hands on my apron, she laughed, sharp, bright, and honest. "I've never seen you laugh," she said. "That's not true," I replied. "You just forgot what it looked like." We made lemonade, the old-fashioned kind, with pulp and not enough sugar, and we sat under the new rosemary plant, sun in our laps, the day unhurried. It was the first time I felt the ache in my chest wasn't loneliness. It was space being made. When she left, she hugged me again, and this time, I hugged back first. That night, I poured tea. Mercy snored against the couch, and my phone buzzed once. A voice message. I didn't recognize the number, but the transcript read, "Hi Mom." I pressed play, and there it was. Not venom, not rage, just her voice, broken, weeping. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore. She's choosing you, and I don't know how to stop making it all about me. I don't want to lose both of you." I stared at the screen, felt everything and nothing. Then I reached for the velvet box, not the one in the safety deposit, but the one labeled for when you're ready. And I whispered to the night air. She wasn't supposed to cry first. The message blinked silently on the phone, and for the first time since the hearing, I wondered, not what I would do next, but who I'd have to be to do it with grace. "If this story found you at midnight, let me know. I'm listening." She didn't ask for forgiveness, she asked for something worse. Understanding. And the voice message didn't wrap itself in a bow. It unraveled. "No, I'm sorry. No, I was wrong. Just a woman who finally dropped the script and didn't know what to say without a cue. I can't fix what I broke," she whispered, "but I don't want to be this person anymore." I didn't call her back, not out of punishment, but because I needed stillness before I gave grace. The next morning, I packed a small bag and drove 3 towns over. No lawyer's folder, no velvet box, just me, a thermos of tea, and the address of the women's shelter I'd been sending care packages to 4 years. They didn't know it was me until I walked in. "Eleanor." The front desk volunteer blinked twice. "You're the one who sends the journals with the peppermint tea, aren't you?" I nodded. She stood, came around the counter, and hugged me like she'd known the shape of my sorrow for a decade. "Your story saved someone," she whispered. She didn't say who, didn't need to, because maybe it wasn't about just one person. Maybe survival echoes. One of the residents saw the necklace, asked if it was real. I smiled. "It's realer than most apologies I've received." She laughed, not mean, just sharp, like she knew the joke was never the jewelry. When I got home, I opened the draft again. My memoir. 100 pages now. Some clean, some bleeding. I wrote the last line of chapter 8, like a truth I'd held between molars for decades. You can forgive a thief for stealing your time, but not for pretending they didn't know what it was worth. The next morning, I got an email from a small publisher. "We'd like to feature a chapter in our summer issue," it read. "We think women need to hear this right now." I didn't cry, but I did walk outside, stood by the rosemary, felt the sun on my hands, and whispered, "Thank you, George." That night, I lit a single candle, sat on the porch with Mercy, and watched the sky fold itself into indigo. My phone buzzed once, a new call, no voicemail this time, just a name on the screen, her name. I stared at it, let it ring once, twice, paused on the third like a held breath before a decision. Because maybe it wasn't a question of if she'd changed, but whether I still needed her to. I answered, voice, small, steady. Mom, she said, I'm not asking for the estate anymore. I'm divorcing him. I'm broke, and Emily, she needs stability. She wants you. But I need you too. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because what do you do when the person who tried to take everything now hands you their wreckage and asks if you'll help them rebuild it? The line went quiet, and all I could hear was my own breath, deciding she wanted help. But not the kind I ever gave before. Not bandages or birthday cards. She wanted a life raft and for me to hold it steady while she decided whether to climb in or just float beside it. I said no, not loudly, not cruelly, just no. Because she hadn't asked me how I was, only what I could offer. The silence on the phone stretched, then cracked. Emily's voice came in, soft. Don't punish me for her. And it hit me like a match to dry kindling. She wasn't asking for rescue. She was asking me not to let her drown with someone else's mistakes. Around her ankles, I sat with it. For 2 days. Didn't write, didn't call, didn't even make tea. Just drank water like it would cleanse me of decades. And then, Thursday night, I went to book club. We'd been meeting for years. For women, 2 bottles of wine, and a rotating stack of grief disguised as fiction. I told them what happened, the whole thing. No edits. Anita said. You owe her nothing, Darla said. But what do you owe yourself? It was Carla who nailed it. You can choose how you show up. You don't have to re-enter the fire to prove you're not burned. I drove home in silence. That night, I lit a candle, and not just for warmth. For clarity. The next morning, I sent the message. Come to the cabin. Just one weekend, both of you. Nothing expected. Just ... space. I didn't wait for a reply. I cleared the second bedroom. Washed sheets that hadn't known company in 2 years, dusted windowsills that still held tiny dead moths, and the smell of cedar. I made soup, carrot, leek, a little turmeric. The kind of soup you stir when your hands need something to do while your heart waits. The driveway crunched under tires just after sunset. I stepped onto the porch. Apron still on. Mercy barked once, not a warning, just acknowledgement. Emily climbed out first. Her backpack sagged heavy. Eyes tired but soft. And then my daughter stepped out. No pearls, just a coat too thin for April and a look I hadn't seen since she was 17. Uncertain, hopeful, quiet. I didn't say welcome, didn't say, I'm glad you came. I just opened the door and let the warmth do the talking. They stepped inside. Emily dropped her bag, took in the rosemary plant outside the window. My daughter looked at the bookshelf like it held her biography. We didn't talk, not yet. Just shared soup and silence and Mercy's snore. Gran, she said, there's something I need to show you. She placed it on the table, a photo, faded at the edges. Me younger, maybe 35, holding her mother as a toddler. We were both laughing, no makeup, no posing, just joy, caught mid-motion. I found it in Mom's jewelry box, she said. She didn't know I took it, but I think she wanted me to, and in that moment, I didn't know if we were breaking something open or closing it gently for the first time. I thought I'd seen everything grief could hand me. The way it shows up in mailboxes, casseroles, and sudden silences. But I hadn't yet seen it folded, not until Emily placed that second slip of paper on the table. Soft, tucked behind the photo, a different kind of ghost. Found it in Mom's attic, she said, in an old coat, inside the lining. She hesitated. I think it was meant for her, but he never gave it. It was George's handwriting. I knew it before I opened it. The slight lean, the way his capital G always looked like a stubborn hook. I unfolded it slow, like something sacred might tear if I rushed. To my daughter, I don't know if you'll ever want this, or if it'll make sense once I'm gone. But I need you to know why I gave the necklace to your mother, and not you, girls, or the family. Because it wasn't meant to be inherited. It was meant to be remembered. You'll think it's small, cheap, not enough, but you weren't there in 1972. You didn't see her after we lost the baby. You didn't see how she held herself like glass and grit all at once. That necklace, that was all I had to offer her. So I gave it, and she wore it like armor. If you ever see her with it, remember, that's not jewelry, that's survival. Please don't judge what you didn't have to endure. She's braver than you'll ever give her credit for. And one day, I hope you'll be brave enough to tell her you know that I didn't cry at the funeral, didn't cry during probate or betrayal, or birthdays that passed like wind through a shut window, but I cried then. At the kitchen table, with my granddaughter's hand on mine, and the truth, decades late but perfectly on time, in my lap. Not sobs, not the kind that twist you, just tears, the kind that arrive when grief finally loosens its grip and gives you room to breathe. We didn't say anything for a long time, just sat. Emily reached for the kettle, poured the last of the tea, refilled both cups. She didn't ask if I was okay, just she knew better. She just sat closer. That night, we played cards, the old way. Gin rummy, on the living room floor with Mercy curled like punctuation by our feet. My daughter watched from the armchair, quiet, present, almost unfamiliar in her stillness, like she was trying not to disturb something being built between us. I didn't force conversation, didn't drag the past out like laundry. We just played, laughed, let the hours fold neatly around us like old quilts. And for once, the past didn't dissolve, it just softened, like bread left in milk, no longer sharp, just tender. Later, when Emily brushed her teeth and my daughter set the kettle for morning, I walked to the drawer, the velvet box, still labeled, "For when you're ready." I held it, heavy, in the palm, not with gold, with intention. Then, I turned, walked into the living room. Emily was curled on the couch, knees up, blanket tucked, but her eyes wide, waiting. I sat beside her, placed the box in her lap, didn't say, "It's time," didn't say, "You've earned it." I just said, "I think you already know what it is." She didn't open it, not right away, just held it to her chest, eyes shining. Then she looked at me and whispered, "I want to wear it the day I read your story, out loud, to people who need to hear it." And in that moment, I didn't feel old. I didn't feel erased. I felt planted, like something I'd buried for safekeeping was finally beginning to bloom. I was once the woman they left out of the group photo, not because I wasn't there, but because I didn't match the furniture. Too loud, too quiet, too stubborn, too soft. You learn, after a while, how erasure wears lipstick, and how legacy is sometimes just what you refuse to forget. The library still smelled like glue and pencil shavings. Same rug I slipped on in '91, same bulletin board with misshapen construction paper hearts, but now my name was on a folding placard, black ink, all caps. Eliano Khalis, author. Funny, they never let me list that title on a tax form, but now it was printed on cardstock like it had always belonged. The room wasn't full, but it didn't need to be. Chairs creaked with attention, the kind you feel in your shoulder blades. Emily sat in the front row, my daughter 2 seats back, spine straight, face unreadable. I stood, no podium, just me, the mic, and a pair of old boots that still carried dust from George's workshop. I used to think legacy meant who you left things to, but now I think it's who remembers you without being told. I paused, watched an older man lower his phone. Good. This wasn't for documentation. This was for digestion. I wasn't a burden, I said. I was the legacy. The words hung there like steam from tea rising, visible, undeniable. And for the first time in my life, they didn't argue back. Afterward, a line formed, short, polite. Some offered thanks, a nod, a thumb on my book's front page like a blessing. Then came her, a girl, barely 20, cheek-pierced, eyes soft but steady. "I got the scholarship," she said, "the one in George Hollis's name." I blinked, didn't expect the world to loop back through her. She hugged me, sudden, tight, whispered into my scarf, "You gave me a name." I wasn't afraid to sign. I didn't ask hers, didn't need to, because legacy doesn't always wear the same last name. Sometimes, it just wears gratitude. Outside, the air was apple clean, crisp, fresh enough to feel like permission. I walked alone toward the parking lot, past daffodils, past silence, past the version of me that once waited for someone else's approval. At the edge of the lot, I stopped, looked up. The sky wasn't poetic, just clear, and I remembered something I'd written, but never read out loud. You don't have to carry the whole house to prove you lived in it. You just have to leave the door open long enough for someone to walk through and say, "I see you." I reached into my coat pocket, felt the weight of the velvet box. Not the necklace, I'd already passed that on, but the label still inside the lining, "For when you're ready." And for the first time, I realized it wasn't just for Emily, it had always been for me. Final line, emotional closure. Under 80 words, I didn't just sell a house. I bought my freedom. And for once, that wasn't something I left behind, it was something I walked into, boots scuffed, spine straight, memory intact. I inhaled, not to calm myself, to claim the moment. Mercy waited in the back seat, her tail tapping the door rhythmically. No rush, no pressure, just presence. I thought about the house I left, the one with creaky stairs and layered lies, and the one I bought with uneven steps and no ghosts in the closets. I thought about my name, the way it used to shrink under Daniel's voice. Now it echoed in rooms I chose to enter. As I opened the car door, I glanced at the notebook in the passenger seat. The page I read from still open, still breathing. The ink hadn't dried yet, but I had. I ran my fingers across the words once more, not to check them, to feel them. And as Mercy leaned her head against my arm, and the wind carried applause from the open library door, like it still had somewhere to go, I whispered to myself, I didn't just sell a house, I bought my freedom.